All right, well, welcome to the next roundtable here. I'm with Sam Joslin, our a building inspector. Sam, thanks for coming by. I know we've had it's a busy time. Our April 28th is fast approaching. That's our town meeting, 6:30 at Bagnell School. I am hoping to see a minimum of 200 people. We have a required minimum of 100. I've asked to order 200 of these. So let's have 200 people. There's some pretty significant issues that we need to work through at that meeting. Those are issues that will be presented. There'll be expertise in a lot of these key issues. The key issues will come to us in the form of what's called articles. And ultimately, we have an opportunity to not only discuss those items, have them presented to us, but we also can engage in some civil debate with some people from the floor, either asking questions about the issues or the articles, and then perhaps even expressing whether they're for or against. You will have some key boards, like typically the finance committee, the finance board, and also the select board will also weigh in on the issue. And then ultimately, we're going to put up our hands and vote the old-fashioned way, like they did back in the 1700s and the 1800s, where the town meeting form of government was invented. So without further ado, this is a very thick document, and I am hoping that nobody comes in and sees this for the first time at town meeting and then tries to read 65 pages of data and a lot of technical stuff. So if you take a look at YouTube Groveland or our channel here in Groveland, there's a series of roundtables like I'm doing here with Sam today. They're about 15, 20 minutes. They're not extremely deep dive. They're more like a helicopter view of some key issues just to get the education curve collapsed as quickly as possible and as easily as possible. Last thing I can say, as of last Friday, the 11th, there is a link. It's very prominent right on grovelandmass.com, the website. You can actually pull up this town meeting warrant and actually begin to look at it, study it a little bit in advance. So, Sam, thanks a lot. A lot of things happening here in town. Appreciate your time.
Sure.
And there's a few articles that I wanted a little bit of help with because the secret of these roundtable discussions has also been a nice way for me to learn what's going on. So this says, I have a, dual role here. I mean, I've studied things and I've had meetings with Rebecca and select board, but sometimes I want to hear directly from people that know this stuff really well. So zoning bylaws happen to be an area that we're going to be, that's going to have quite a few issues or warrants. And so I'm going to ask you about 3 of them. One of them is Article 20. Quite a few pages in this document. It's pages 26 through 36. Article 20, floodplain overlay district. I read it 3 times. I kind of know what it is, but I really need it, boiled down to layman's terms.
Yeah,
please.
So we currently have a floodplain overlay district. This new article is to get us to meet the NFIP, which is the National Flood Insurance Program requirements, so that our folks in Groveland that are in a floodplain, we have about a little less than 50 houses in the floodplain, allows them to continue engaging in the NFIP program and insuring their houses.
Okay.
Barring that, an uninsurable house typically is one you can't get a mortgage on, which makes it unsellable unless you're paying cash. So most of it is housekeeping. We have new maps that are coming out. The feds are very slow at pumping those maps out, but we do have new ones coming out. The date of those maps, I believe, is June 8th of this year, which is reflected in the bylaw. If you want to look at the maps, you can go to the town clerk's office. She has copies, or I can help you go online at the floodplain, FEMA's floodplain mapping program. It's not real exciting, but it's there if you want to look at it.
So does this allow, so do we have a floodplain and now it's being modified, or are we creating a floodplain district?
So we already have a floodplain district,
Mhm.
and our floodplain is developed through a process called LiDAR, where they do flyovers with drones
Mhm.
that ping off of certain areas, plus input from the towns that give them maybe info that might be missed by that process. These new maps really aren't impacting us significantly. There's some slight modifications
Mhm.
based on newer technology
Mhm.
that refine the lines.
Right,
Very minimal substantive change there.
okay.
The biggest change that I implemented in working with trying to look at other towns' bylaws and working through DCR, which is Department of Conservation and Recreation, is currently I am the floodplain administrator for the town, which means I do the enforcing. The permit granting authority under our current bylaw is our planning board.
Okay,
Um,
and you want to change that
I want to change that
to the building inspector?
make the floodplains administrator, me as the building
Makes
official,
sense.
be the permit granting authority. The couple reasons. One, and not disparaging our planning board, but they admittedly know little to nothing about floodplain regulations.
Sure,
Most of these regulations relate to structures. Most of those regulations are mirrored in the building code. So I'm very familiar with them.
sure.
And even
It
more
seems
so,
more seamless. If I'm building a house or I'm building a deck and I've got some vegetative wetlands behind me and I want to make sure I get insurance and all of that has to be permitted, I can go to Sam.
so, and that's
The
one
building
thing,
inspector.
we do see a lot of
Besides
overlap
going through
in with
besides going through the rest of the process.
wetland and floodplain.
Yeah.
Floodplain doesn't necessarily need to be a wetland.
Okay,
Because it's just, we're subject to tidally influenced the river and then still water flooding. Just pooling waters, which doesn't always equal wetlands. So there's all these levels, and my other reason for changing it to me, and not that I want any added responsibility or duties, but I worked out a way with DCR that in having the engineers that would already be involved in locating and designating base flood elevation, where those floodplains are, with additional information from them, I can now take the process and shorten it. So it's a one-stop shop. They can come to me. There's a little additional cost that would be additional info through the engineer. But that cost is probably going to be about what it would cost to go through the planning process, minus the, however long, potentially months long process to go through them. DCR was very excited to see this used as a way to expedite permitting while adding actually additional protections. So we get extra protection. The NFIP gets more than what they want, and the process is shortened for about the same amount of money.
so anybody in Groveland in a flood zone can get flood insurance.
As long as we're in the NFIP program.
And we have to be, and this is going to just make us more compliant. And then the biggest impact is that the administration shifts primarily onto your position.
Yep. So
Inspector.
we come into compliance with this
Perfect.
article, and we also make a streamlined process.
Okay, great.
So, and the reality is it only is going to affect a few dozen people in town.
Right, absolutely.
But again, I urge people to vote for it because we certainly don't want to make those homes unsaleable through them being uninsurable.
I'm sure,
So,
sure. That would be kind of a nightmare.
yeah. And again, it's just mandatory language, and most of the language was not significant changes that we got from NFIP. It was a lot of cleanup, pairing definitions to what's in the building code. So we're using the same terms to mean the same things.
Same thing, yeah.
Administrative changes, those types of things. So there's really, the map doesn't change much. The overlay district bylaw doesn't change much, other than the fact I've taken that.
It's the
process
administration is the
from-
biggest impact.
Yeah, and that wasn't something the NFIP asked us to do, but in looking at it as someone who was a contractor, a builder, and someone who enforces floodplains, I thought this is overly burdensome to send people through this when they've already got an engineer involved that can put a stamp on it saying it complies.
So you could have a situation where someone wants to build a subdivision and maybe there might be a piece of land that they can't because of potential flooding,
And that's the thing,
theoretically,
you potentially could build in a flood zone.
or you could.
We
Regardless.
encourage everyone out,
Yeah.
but there are ways to build
And this,
appropriately in a flood zone.
I see, okay.
Plum Island was my jurisdiction. There's
Oh,
houses going up
great.
all the.
You're a real
the-
expert.
The entire island is a flood zone.
Oh, my goodness.
So yeah, you can, it just has to be done in a proper way. And that's why I said, I'm pretty well educated on it. I got a steep learning curve type of education when I started there.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm real comfortable with it, much more so than our planning board, so it only made sense. And one of the concerns select board had, I don't know if it was this town or in West Newbury, was the concern that I was, taking that authority away. It's not an authority they want. It's not really an authority I want, but unfortunately I have it. It makes much more sense to do
Great.
it this way.
So the floodplain overlay district, the accessory dwelling units, the battery storage and the MBT Communities Act, you've sponsored those warrants. Is that correct?
The MBTA is kind of a joint sponsored through
With
the town administrator. Well, it's through our zoning board, but the MBTA is, I think a lot of people are familiar with it. They've seen it in the news that there is a requirement for
Sure.
communities to adopt this
Sure.
or risk funding.
Some funding.
Uh,
So generally speaking, with Sam making these suggestions is, the natural default is that Sam is therefore our building inspector is recommending, these changes and these modifications to our zoning bylaw. Now, Sam, you're not a resident of Groveland, so you can't vote on any of these.
I
So
cannot.
you're gonna be sitting in a special section.
I sit
You're
off to
gonna
the
be sitting in the
side.
bleachers.
I can answer questions if people let me, but other than that,
And I can call on you, and I'm glad you'll be there on April 28th in case I get into the weeds, no pun intended. So thank you for that, and thanks for being such a great support to our town. You've been
absolutely.
doing that for many years. And it's recognized and appreciated.
Thank you.
The accessory dwelling units, the ADUs, tell us a little bit of the pesky little thing where people can build tiny little houses in their backyard, which is freaking out some people.
It is freaking out a lot of people.
All over the state. It's not just Groveland, so.
No, this is a Massachusetts wide state law. It's what is it? Chapter 150 of the Acts of 2024 brought in the ability for as of right accessory dwelling units, which are attached, detached, or integral living units up to 900 square feet as of right, meaning they don't have to go through any special permit process. If you have a lot of land that a single family is zoned for single family dwellings, you can have one, period. That's a big change from what we're used to. We allowed accessory dwellings through certain processes with certain restrictions of owner occupancy, certain numbers of, we calculated gross floor differently, a whole bunch of things. The state has come in and said, nope, 900 square feet, you're allowed. You can't regulate who lives there. The primary or the accessory can be rented, so the owner doesn't have to live on site anymore.
Doesn't have to be family members.
Doesn't have to be family members. It depends, I think, on the demographic of the town. I know I live in Haverhill. I've been talking to the building inspector there. They have literally hundreds of permits lined up, ready to go for accessory dwelling units.
Wow.
In the two towns I do, West Newbury and Groveland, I probably have half a dozen in each that are thinking about it. There's a couple that have been permitted, but and in these cases, it's more, we do see what the original intent was for in-laws, for family members, for homeowners that their house is just too big now, but they don't want to leave Groveland. They don't want to sell their property because they want it for their kids someday, or they actually move into the accessory unit and their kids and their family move into the big house.
Yeah.
So it really
So
does
it's
have
not just a drive for affordable housing. It's also a response, I think, a great big response I'll make this an editorial, I guess, it's my opinion, of demographic changes to our population.
Yeah, and it's one of the things in our housing production plan, not only in Groveland, but Massachusetts knows we have a housing shortage. In our housing production plan, we specifically have a housing shortage for older adults that want to stay in town. It's not viable if you're either a couple or a single person that's retired to live in and maintain a 2,500 to 3,000 square foot house.
Yeah.
Just not
Well,
cost
that'd be
effective.
my wife and I. We live in a 4-bedroom house, 2 floors, the two of us. We do like the space, but maybe someday we made a long-term commitment to living here. Maybe someday when we're a little bit older, we might say, we don't want to sell it. Maybe we'll build something on our property to.
Well, and I saw a good article
Interesting.
for a college student, got out of college,
Yeah.
was able to buy a property, convert it was a glorified shed on the property to a dwelling unit for her to live in. And she rented out the main house just to pay off her mortgage. And she said this was the only way that would afford her the ability to buy a house, is if
Interesting.
someone else is paying for it.
So I can rent, if I build a dwelling unit in my backyard, we still have to go through a permitting, obviously. I mean,
Everything else still applies, building code, sanitary
Sure, of
code,
course.
wetlands, floodplains, all
I
of
can
it.
rent it, right?
Yep.
But can I sell it too?
That's a question we're still waiting for an answer from the state. You can't sell it outright, but the question is, could you condo it?
Interesting.
And right now it's still being, looked at. So I don't really know that answer.
That's a fascinating area, actually.
So this bylaw, although the most impactful one presented, or one of the most, the MBTA is pretty, but of the three I'm talking about today, it's the shortest. Essentially what we've done is we have a permit, a special permit provision for anything larger than the 900. We allow up to 10% more, which isn't much, but gives some flexibility. Anything less than that, we've deleted our bylaw in its entirety and replaced it with the state regulation.
Okay.
And the reason for that is whether we do it or not, the state regulation, or I shouldn't call it a regulation, the state law supersedes our bylaw.
Okay.
So as of February 2nd, that went into effect. So whether we approve this or not, it's in effect. So it's really
almost procedural, really.
It really
Horrible.
it's more so to avoid confusion. So when people come in and they're looking at our bylaw saying, I got to do all this stuff, when in the reality is none of that applies anymore.
Right. Interesting.
So, and then there is, if anyone's really interested, if you look up 760 CMR section 71 are your ADU regs from the state. Good place to go if you Google EOHLC. I forget what the acronym is for, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities.
Yeah.
Yep. So EOHLC space ADU,
Yeah.
you'll get a nice document that you can look at.
So because this already exists on the books, now I understand why the article is effectively, it's not a lot of words, just on one page or 1.5 pages, just some language changes.
Yeah, again, it was really delete everything.
Yeah,
Put in one sentence that says,
wow.
See the state law.
Now I understand. I appreciate that. Related to this is MBTA, but I won't treat this, I won't include this in this discussion. I'm going to work with Rebecca at my next segment, Roundtable. Also, if you do take a look at YouTube, Groveland YouTube, I did a segment on this, about 15 minutes. I did a little bit of a deep dive. I researched it and I explained it. So I won't take up Sam's time. The next and last item for you, Sam, Article 24. So Article 20 floodplain, Article 22 accessory dwelling units, Article 24 battery storage, and then 25 is MBTA. So Article 24 battery storage, that one there, I got a nosebleed reading it, pages 37 to 48. And I'm thinking, what do you mean battery storage? I was thinking of my father storing batteries in the garage back in 1972.
And this is one where I'm very happy we're talking about, because we're talking about massive battery storage. This is, They're called BESS, Battery Energy Storage Systems, and these are not what you'd have in your 1 and 2 family home.
Okay.
You know, like a Tesla Powerwall is the one I always hear people talk about.
Okay.
These are massive systems that are going in place to help supplement power for the grid. So initially,
So is it Groveland Electric?
well, we already have the battery storage bylaw in place currently,
Yeah.
which was developed because Groveland Electric was actually looking at considering a battery storage facility. Didn't work out, but it's a good idea to have this in because this falls under a protected use like other utilities if it's tied back into a utility, which means that we can't say you can't do it. Just like we can't tell someone you can't put up a cell tower if you need cell coverage. We have to allow it. There's a law on the books that allows utilities to do those things. We can't get in the way. Without the battery storage bylaw, though, we had no control really over the site. So although zoning, the law would say you can do it, our zoning gave us no guidance on how to do it.
And where to do it.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is we wanted to make sure that we could bring in everything we needed here as far as neighborhood impacts, environmental impacts, fire safety, fire suppression, training on fire suppression, everything we could, basically a really robust site plan review.
Okay. And who has these batteries?
If you go on YouTube, you can see them. They're all over the place. They're all over the country. Haverhill's looking at one right now that could be one of the largest in the US.
So is it the municipality that uses these batteries?
It's the municipality that will use them or the grid will use them.
Or the grid, okay.
So they're used to, during the day, store excess energy.
Sure.
And then, I shouldn't say during the day, because it could be at night, depending on which season you're in.
Right.
But store that excess energy, and then when the grid's strained, to release some of that. So these are massive. These are acres of batteries.
Wow.
They come in delivered in the large metal storage containers is what they look like, with a self-contained suppression system. And they're just put on the lots.
So this battery storage article helps direct and gives the town the ability to have a site plan review.
Yes, yeah, and very thorough.
So if National Grid or whatever, the National Grid says we need to put this giant battery in in Groveland, we're gonna have a process to say, okay, well, we're gonna control how that's done and where it's done.
Yep, so it's usually a third-party company. Think of like your solar fields.
All right.
A third-party company comes
Sure.
in, does a big field,
Yeah.
they hook into the grid with an agreement to them to sell their energy. Same thing here, they store their energy.
Wow.
We already have this in place.
Yeah.
The changes that we're proposing in this article, most are some corrections, some rewording. The only thing we made that was an actual change is there was a section on smaller systems that were exempt, that would be in a house. And where they're getting a little larger and the NFPA, which is your fire codes, change, we had what is specifically in there. We just rounded that up a little bit higher. So as the code changes, we don't have to keep coming back and changing our bylaw to match the code.
Great.
So,
wow, I think you're gonna be at the center of attention at this time. There's a lot of, well, zoning bylaws. I mean, that's your area, the zoning board, planning board. So
yeah, it's
well done. Thank you.
They're complicated.
It is. It's complicated
and
language. I read it. It's like, that's why I gotta talk to Sam because I'm having a hard time really understanding it also. I'll be honest with you.
But it's really, as someone from out of town and has no real horse in the race.
Yeah.
These are all good things. The battery storage, whether we have something in place or not, we could potentially get it. So the reason we put this together is to ensure that we have some control. If we get one, we've got as much control as possible. Floodplain, it's just compliant with the state and federal regs. And then the accessory dwelling units, we're again going to comply with state law.
State law, sure.
I would expect probably in a year, we'd be coming back to the accessory dwelling units as we get more information over what we can regulate and what we can't. But for now, we've put forward the best we got based on the info we have. So
Great. Well, Sam, thanks again. Fantastic job, folks. Hopefully we'll see a lot of you at the meeting. Hopefully you'll have an opportunity to go online and take a look at the warrant that's been posted on grovelandmass.com. Hopefully you'll go to Groveland YouTube or our channel and taking these 15 or 20-minute sessions. This is the longest one. We're about 27 minutes, maybe 25, but it's big stuff. But not big stuff that we can't handle, just more, we need to understand it better. And so that's why we bring the experts in. So,
and if you have any questions, stop by the office, shoot me an email.
and what is your email? S. Joslin.
Email is sjoslin, spelled Joslin at grovelandma.com.
Great. Thanks, Sam.
All right.
Appreciate it. All right.
Have a
You
good one.
take care. We'll see you at the meeting.